Hey everyone, Adrian here. Welcome to the Conversations with Adrian podcast. Today, I'm joined by Danny Parrott. Danny, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Adrian. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, man, it's good to have you. I've been watching you on Instagram for a ways and really liking your content. You're speaking to my heart in terms of the People's Herbalist, which is your brand and the name that you set off air that you're rocking with, which is good. I love your message about getting back to this sort of plant life and this simple kind of trusting your body to do its thing and using what Mother Nature gives us to heal ourselves and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's a fantastic message, which is why I want you on the show. But I guess before we get into some of that type of work, I'd love for you to maybe share with me your background and how you come to becoming the People's Herbalist.
Okay. My background is in sociology, actually. Social psychology is what I got my bachelor's from from Rutgers University out here in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
But I fell into herbalism after I got out of college, going through the same struggles as most, watching family members and close friends get sick from things that are incurable, say that with quotation marks.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing that internally there had to be other options and other ways for people to address their health. And I nosedived directly into herbs, specifically a class of herbs called adaptogens. After I had done some basic preliminary research to see there's a lot of information about how these herbs are very useful to people throughout millennia. Why don't we know about this right now? So I took it amongst myself to try to test and try these herbs in many different forms and ways on myself and friends and family members to see that, these write-ups and historical content actually have some validity. And then I wanted to take that and turn it into a business, a fun business that I can really benefit the largest amount of people, because I believe in trying to address the biggest elephants in the room first, and that for me, what I've clearly seen over, many years, not just the last two, but emotional health, anxiety, and dealing with stress in general, which has tremendous impacts on how we're able to heal.
That's amazing. You don't seem too old. How old are you?
I'm 35.
35, man, you look so good.
I say it's the herbs, man. It's the herbs.
Must be. All right. Well, let's segue into that because you mentioned like the adaptogens and stuff like that. For those that are not familiar with that sort of terminology, can you explain what that means in terms of herbs?
Right. Adaptogens are it's just a category of herbs. They fall under a couple of scrutinies that make them separate from other herbs. So one is they're safe for long-term use. The other is they help bring your body into a more balanced state when it comes to dealing with stress. And three, they help improve the immune system in some way or another. So they have to fall under those three categories in order to be considered an adaptogen. So it couldn't be a fruit, a root, a mushroom, a bark, anything that is natural and organic that has those three profound benefits to the body. So that's my specialty, and I believe that they're definitely the best approach for anybody that wants to start getting into herbs.
Yeah, nice. And so what makes them so I guess conducive to great health in terms of our bodies? I've read up on a lot about plant medicine, for example, and things like that, and it's really interesting to discover that there's certain, I guess, how do I put this, like structures within our body that are similar to the structures within the plant itself. Does that make sense? It's kind of like you've got more than me. So can you explain how these adaptogens sort of make sense to the body in ways that maybe other herbs or other vegetables, plants, whatever, don't?
Yeah, specifically, like you had mentioned, there are a lot of analogs inside the herbal community that really match up with certain chemicals in our body from proteins and even, kind of mimicking some hormones and helping direct them. So utilizing these adaptogens, they're a little bit different because they have so many different phytonutrients and polysaccharides and all of these things that are inside of them that are fairly unknown in comparison to a lot of the other basic, very nutritious plants that we ingest. So they have these abilities to mimic certain things to bring balance within our body. And that right there is like, it's a great area for science, because there are herbs that will have seemingly opposite effects on one specific health issue or organ system. For example, the thyroid, they have hyperactive and underactive thyroid, but you can use an herb like ashwagandha, which can either bring down the aggressively or overactive function or bring up the underactive function. And that, it doesn't seem like it makes any sense, because how can one herb do both? But they just really work with your body to find that balance.
Yeah, that's amazing. I guess from, if I was to put my mind into the listener's mind, I think a lot of this last couple of years has done a bit of a number on everyone's mindset in terms of their own health and wellness, right? So we've kind of had this distrust within our medical community, and there's a lot of things that have been stricken from the record, so to speak. We've got all these beautiful vitamins and minerals and herbs and things like that, and all of a sudden we're not allowed to use them, or the distribution of them has been withheld. It's really, and then the other part of it, I think, which is fascinating, is that it's caused a complete mistrust in our own ability to identify what makes us ill, what makes us well, and the natural things that are at our fingertips in terms of improving our health and our vitality. And so we've kind of had this distrust in ourselves. Does that make sense? You've got,
yes,
yeah, like in order to know whether I'm sick or not, like one of the symptoms is no symptoms. So I need to I need to get a test. And so all of a sudden I'm always in a state of, I don't know what my body's doing anymore. I don't trust myself. I've done away with 100 or even 1,000 years of information and technology that's been brought up from my ancestors. I've just done away with it. And all of a sudden I'm running off to get superficial things or something external from me, which is synthetic and made up and fabricated and, all of that kind of stuff, in place of something that comes from a tree, grows out of the ground, whatever it is. So what's your take on that? This must be a spin out for you.
Yes, this is really crazy. The distrust, that word is so key, because it goes both ways. And it seems like a lot of people, well, most people are on two sides of the fence. Like you said, they're either distrusting themselves by trusting the announcements that are coming, saying that every and anything is a symptom of sickness and you need to go check yourself. But then at the same time, you have the massive distrust over those loudspeakers and TV screens and radio stations and the propaganda telling you that, that nonsense that clearly doesn't make sense to anyone that is thinking rationally and calmly and thoroughly, even utilizing our own science of what infections and sickness and that entire process is. Anybody that threw that out the window, they have no trust with themselves. And the people that held on to that really basic information, where if you're not sick, you're not sick, they have distrusted everything that's come out of the mainstream now. So, it has been a very, very, I would say, a roller coaster of emotions, because it's, there's fury, and then there's large sorrow of seeing how many people have been victimized. And then it comes to a point of like almost apathy. And then it comes to a point of, now it's like, yo, this is humorous. I can't believe I'm living in a time that I can tell 20 years from now, we're going to look back on this and we're going to be cracking up at how foolish people have been and can be. So there's that word distrust. We need to try to find where we can trust, how to trust again. And I think that really starts with, trusting ourselves as humanity, the brilliance and magnificence of all the miracles happening within you with each breath that you take, going to sleep and waking up and realizing you just did, you know, a couple 100 billion new cells in that factory of yours, with no problem. Like you didn't even have to think or plan on it. It just happened. Like the beauty of our bodies, we have to realize that is key. And there has been a lot of efforts to, you know, negate our abilities to heal. That's why we have to relegate our attention and our trust right back into nature and what it can provide, whether that be, you know, some spring water from a magical place, or just beautiful fresh air and sunshine that you can absorb every day. But mainly and most importantly, what you're consuming in the way of your food. And I consider herbs food. That a lot of times, you know, there's professionals, lay person, and all in between that look at herbs as if, look, this is your medicine now, as if this is a replacement for, you know, the old traditional pill for every ill from the allopathic medical system. That's not the way it was intended. I mean, herbs can mimic some of those things, and in fact, they can do them even better. But that is not the correct approach in order to utilize them. You utilize them daily as part of your diet. And instead of saying doses, you say serving size. You know, it's a real simple transition on how you're looking at this beautiful, beautiful part of nature that has so much benefit to us. And, you know, recognizing that and taking our power back instead of trusting. And I don't know what the health regulatory systems over there are, but we got the CDC and the FDA over here in America that they are just straight up trash. I mean, what they're doing, at least in regards to telling people what they should and should not consume, they are really, really bad at that. But at the same time, let me give them kudos for keeping sanitary measures up in regards to, you know, large production facilities. So, I mean, there's, you know, double-edged sword. There's some good, but mostly bad. When it comes to advising people, because they're Food and Drug Administration, they are supposed to monitor and make sure that the food and the medicine that people are consuming is not harming them. But they just let the floodgates, let, you know, corporate entities put whatever into these packaged products and push out to our population. And we're just looking at chronic sickness and chronic mental health issues because of how these things are affecting the way our brain is working. So, I mean, it's always a lot of work to do, but reverting back to the plants and getting back into nature is key.
Danny, it's no different over here. We have the Therapeutics Goods Association, TGA. And so it's the same deal, man. Like the last couple of years has definitely exposed them to the point where you realize that their advice and their recommendations are really not conducive to good health at all. So it's very contradictory in terms of what their role is. And we have our own you know, red tick or green tick of approval and all that kind of stuff and all the boxes. But, you know, again, it's packaged food and there's just a lot of things to be questioned about all of that. And again, this is why I want to speak to people like you, because I think that you mentioned a couple of things when you were speaking just then, but one of the words that come out a bunch of times was healing. And so I think this last couple of years, for me personally, my experience has been a healing journey. Yeah. So physically, mentally, you know, just emotionally, it's all been about a healing journey. And all of those emotions that come up that you talked about definitely were in my body and ravaging through my body, like, you know, tons of rage and hurt and resentment and lamenting and, you know, sorrow and mourning. I keep telling people, like, this has been like a mourning of a death, you know, so it's just been a 1,000 ego deaths to me. But the word healing is definitely something that resonates with me. So maybe we can talk to that, because I think that there's a lot of toxins in the air. There's a lot of toxins in our water. There's a lot of toxins in the food that we eat. There's a lot of things that we do that are toxic to our bodies. anyway. And I think that where someone like you comes in with your recommendations and advice around herbs is that we can kind of start to reverse the process a little bit of what the damage that maybe we have done. And so I guess a little insight for me is I've always been in fitness and have been in sport for many years, but also in the area of like bodybuilding and weightlifting. So my train of thought has been consume shit tons of protein every day, and every meal's got to have protein. So I've just been consuming tons and tons of dead flesh over the years, right? So it's certainly benefited me in some ways, but I think now in my 40s, I'm starting to feel that there's a lot of things that I have done to my body over the years just through external forces in terms of the recommendations that I was following at that time. And it's made me start to think now of how many things I want to undo and reverse those processes. So what would you say to someone in terms of increasing their health and vitality and healing themselves? What would be almost like a basic protocol or a basic way of looking at things in order to remedy some of the problems or issues that they might have?
I think the first thing is starting with your belief and looking at and have done damage to accumulate over years, but our bodies regenerate very, very quickly. And it does not take a lot for us to actually heal and recover and bring our bodies back into a good state of health and in an optimal state of health. Tomorrow is always a new day. You're always rebuilding every cell in your body, every bone in your body, every piece of cartilage, every muscle. It's always going to continue to grow. Even if you did, you put your body through the ringer for, a decade. It's never too late. That's number one. And that mentality and understanding how your body is so miraculous to heal, it can never be understated. And starting with that, the belief and understanding that you are a miracle healing machine, then you add in as much things as possible to offset the external damages. And we're looking at, first and foremost, the air. Depending on where you live, if you're living in the inner city, if you're living in a rural area, you can kind of get an idea of the air quality. But if you are in an area that doesn't have great air quality, you want to do something to help your respiratory system, your respiratory tract. Obviously the water is a huge portion, and recognizing that your water sources or your fluid intake is very, very important. But water plain is not always the solution. You want to make sure that your water is coming in forms that have really, really beneficial nutrients in it. So fruits have a lot of water that's actively useful for our bodies because we have tons of fluids. We look at our bodies, we are a sack of fluid and cell. We have our blood, obviously that's the majority, but then we have interstitial fluid, which is like in between the blood and outside of the cell. We have our lymphatic fluid, which is kind of moving different debris through our bodies. The cerebral spinal fluid, which is going through our nervous system and central nervous system. All of these fluids, they have water in it, but they have water in different forms. So the way that we consume our water should also be in different forms and always full of nutrients. So I honestly don't like to drink straight up water. I like to drink water that has minerals that are added into it. I put a lot of shilajit and teas in my water. So that's always a key. So we got air, we got water, and then obviously, the food sources that you're consuming, try to eat as locally and as seasonally as possible. I don't like to give people strict diets. I think we're omnivores and everybody has a little bit of different ways of how their bodies react to different things. But make sure that you're trying to eat as clean as possible, stay away from as much processed food as possible. And those are the major keys. And obviously, most importantly, let me not forget about resting. Make sure that you are getting good sleep. And in order to get good sleep, you need to have your stress in balance. You gotta be able to address that parasympathetic state so you can calm yourself and just relax,
Mm.
get that good sleep, because that's where the majority of the healing occurs.
Yeah, so true. Now, I'm really glad you mentioned all those points. I think that's certainly something that comes from a mind, body, spirit perspective, right? I mean, a lot of people use that word sort of holistic, which is kind of thrown about a fair bit, but it
Right.
certainly is not just one thing in isolation, isn't it? It's everything put together, you know? So I think that that kind of whole approach to things is something that is truly beneficial. I love what you mentioned about different fluids and those sorts of things, and also just going back to just your faith or intention and your presence into what you're eating. A lot of the things that I have recently started to bring back to, I guess, a daily practice is kind of looking at a food that I'm eating and going, like, in my mind saying, this is my intention for this food. I want this to do, like, do your thing in my body, you know, and make it work good, right? So I know why I'm eating you or drinking you or whatever, and this is the role that I want you to play. So I'm kind of having that conscious thought into how things are processing within my body. But you
I love
mentioned a
that.
few things. Sheer Legit, I definitely got onto when I interviewed Tyler Tolman. He was like, you know, it's legit, you know, it's the shit, it's the sheer
It's the shit.
legit, you know, it just so I got onto that, and then ashwagandha is definitely something that I've been supplementing with and taking for a ways. As a man, I can certainly feel the benefits of having those two supplements in my diet. I can certainly feel the vitality and virility, you know, in terms of like how I feel energetically. But can you tell me why that is? I've researched enough into it to sort of feel validated as to why I should take it. But can you tell me why those particular supplements have such an effect on the human body?
Yes. Well, Shilajit by itself is very, very special. The amount of nutrients that it has, the enzymes, the amino acids, like it's a very, very complete way to give your body the necessary nutrients and minerals that can be bioabsorbed. And when we don't, usually the cause of all of like fatigue and lethargy, anything that is causing you to have no energy is your inability to utilize these nutrients. So they're not bioavailable or they're not there in your diet. Either one, the lack of that is is what is causing your inability to have the energy necessary. So Shilajit by itself is a really key portion. But then we have, you know, you add an herb like ashwagandha on top of that, then you're starting to tweak the way that our hormones are functioning. And then we can start turning on some of the male hormones necessary for us to get up and get ready for action. You know, some of those things that over time get depleted because of stress, because of lack of nutrients, etc. So you're really doing your body a favor by addressing the stress levels and harmonizing the endocrine system. And then when you're working, you know, at basically at full throttle, all cylinders are running, that only results in more energy and more ability to do the things that you want to do and you're capable of doing.
Yeah, 100%. So in terms of the minerals and all the stuff that has in it, why does it have such an impact? I'm still trying to get to the bottom of just exactly what gives it its power, if that makes sense. You know, it seems like it's just such a hidden little gem in terms of herbs and supplements. Can you tell me more about it or not?
I'll give you my perspective. And I've heard that majority of doctors and scientists attribute this to the fulvic and the humic acids. Those are things that are not really readily available in our food sources anymore because they're not in the soil systems. So even if we're eating a really, really healthy diet, those things are not, they're not readily available. And when you introduce them back into, because a lot of people will go many years, if not a lifetime, without really consuming that. And our body is so, like I said, miraculous. It can make do with other things to try to, you know, still keep your body functioning. But when you add something that is so nutrient rich and something that, you know, our ancestors have had readily available for a long time, you haven't had it for many years, and then you hit it, it hits your system, and you're like a brand new person. It's like you went back in time, and you're absorbing the energies of the ancestors, you know, because they were able to have access to this stuff. So it
Mm.
makes your body full of virility. That's how I see it really working, because you're just adding a piece that is very vital to humanity, and humans just kind of got accustomed to not having it.
Mm. Yeah, it's so it's interesting when you say that, because I feel like a lot of our nutrients have just been stripped over the years. And the thing that you said about the soil, you know, it brings to mind a recent, I guess, situation on Earth, which is like our honey and our bees and you know, all of those sorts of things. And a lot of that comes from the fact that we've been destroying our soil and our plants and taking away a lot of the flowers and just the nature like that they can survive in, right? So I feel like that we definitely got an uphill battle trying to get as much nutrient rich foods and nutrient density foods into our system all the time, because we're drinking and eating stuff that's basically devoid of all goodness, right? It's just like it's dead food. So yeah, I think that the more consciously aware that you are of all of that, the more it sorts of it puts a highlight on exactly what you're eating and how beneficial it is to the body. And I think from my perspective, I sort of draw upon that bodybuilding background. Usually wouldn't eat anything unless it served the purpose. So unless it had protein, carbohydrates, and good fats, like wasn't going in my body. So I think I need to sort of introduce that back in a sense where, you know, we're eating purposefully and making sure that this is actually going to do some good and no harm. Would you agree?
Absolutely. It's eating purposefully, and then having the diversity in the foods that we're eating, because you know every food source has a little bit of different something, especially the plants. You know, their phytonutrient components are kind of left out of the equation when you think about the macronutrients that are necessary for us to live.
Mm,
And then you don't even consider the phytonutrients. Like, well, there's phytonutrients in there that are very, very vital to help many functions. So having a diversity of those phytonutrients is kind of like, I see it as you know, you work out, but you don't do the same exact workout every single day, every single time. You need to switch it up, do different things to stimulate different muscle systems. Same way as you want to add in different herb phytonutrients or vegetables to, you know, create a different molecule that can, you know, trigger a cascade of beneficial healing processes in one cell or one part of the body.
mm. So if I was to consult with you and just say, look, I need to get some vitality, some energy. I'm working hard. I'm not sleeping the best. There's a few things that I need to pick up within my lifestyle. What are you kind of like? Do you have a top 5 or a top 10 herbs that you would recommend that people introduce into their lives and have that as a kind of staple as a way of increasing their health and vitality and healing?
Yeah, but I really look at, I would say if there was a staple, I would say Shilajit would be the staple, because it's kind of the baseline for everything else. But I would also, if we're having a consult, I want to know which areas of opportunity in you need the most, need to be addressed first. So, I mean, I really look at the nervous system. I'll look at the gastrointestinal system. I'll look at, I'll ask questions to determine where the issues are. Right? Is it detoxification system? Is it what's really happening in your life? Because, you know, your body is only giving a few signals, but where you're dealing with your environment, that's where the consults really are important, because we want to know, you know, who you're around, what you're around, not just specifically what's happening to you, but what other things can be contributing to those things happening inside you. So that would be the first portion. And then to add on that, if it's let's say an issue with your nervous system, then I would say lion's mane would be the top for that. Even though it has, you know, other benefits as well to the immunity, also has some benefits to detoxification organs, but, you know, its main function would be benefiting the brain. Then if you had like an autoimmune condition, where, you know, immunity is going crazy, allergies or something in response that is generating extra motion that should not be there within your immune system, then I would probably suggest an herb like reishi, which is known to modulate the immune response. And then, you know, I would go down the line, but I would say the main ones that I like to use, because I like to do a blend as well. Astragalus is definitely top herb because it's synergizing to other herbs. And I think combining herbs is a really, really good tool to use for the majority of people. Some are a little more sensitive and need to try one at a time to see how it's going to work. But astragalus is definitely a staple for me. Goji berry extracts are one of my favorites as well for their benefit to the gastrointestinal system, the gallbladder in particular, and pretty much all of the hollow organs from the intestines to the throat to the stomach. I would also, ashwagandha is up there as well for its tremendous impact on our ability to rest and recover, and also benefits to the thyroid, and also benefits to energy, because there's a lot of research and studies showing that ashwagandha can actually increase strength. For not, I would say the study said for the regular person, not for the gym head. You know, if you're in the gym heavy and you're working out every day, this does not have such a dramatic impact on your strength. But for people that are just starting, it's definitely a good tool to build your strength quickly. So I said goji berry, shilajit, ashwagandha, lion's mane, and reishi. So yeah, that would be 5 that I would suggest as probably the top of the list. I left out chaga, but chaga is one of my favorites as well.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
With your lifestyle, in terms of complementing the herbs that you take, is there a way that you kind of look at maybe complementing the herbs that you supplement with the diet that you follow? Is that something that you're like, do you promote like a vegetarian diet, or do you have a particular way of eating or anything like that?
No, yeah, I don't really particularly suggest people to follow strict diets. I tell them to figure out what works best for them and try different food sources. You know, look at what you're doing on a daily basis, and if you are feeling bad by the food that you eat, then switch. Do it gradually, but make a change. And always consume your herbs with your food, because your herbs are your food. And in my business, like, we've made it our duty to bridge that gap of supplements and food and beverages. So we make drinks, we make sauces, like we really combine the culinary with the herbal medicine to create a very streamlined process of I'm consuming my foods and my herbs simultaneously. Instead of making that process a 2-step process, you just blend it all together to get and make, I like to say, you make every sip count and you make every bite matter to your healing process.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, maybe you can tell me more about that. I'd love for people to find out more about you. I certainly would recommend following the People's Herbalist on Instagram for sure. You've got some really good content there. But then also, like you said, this is your business, and you've got products and sheer legit water I saw on your website, and you know, all that kind of stuff. It looks awesome. So where would people go to find you?
Yeah, you can find me right on thepeoplesherbalist.com.
Yeah, nice. That's the way. Well, listen, Danny, I really appreciate your time, man. I applaud you for everything that you're doing. Such a young guy and making an impact as well, which is awesome. And yeah, man, I wish you well with your business. I look forward to chatting with you again.
Adrian, I appreciate you, man. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure, buddy. Talk to you soon.
All right.